You're listening to Movies to Watch Before You Die, episode number 4. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Movies to Watch Before You Die, a weekly podcast that breaks down the most important movies ever made that will change the way you think, the way you feel, and hopefully the way you live your life. I am your host, Mark Gazica, and with me today is my wonderful friend, Dan Helbling. Say hi to everyone, Dan.
Hello, everyone.
And Dan, what movie did we watch?
We watched Whiplash.
That's right. Whiplash, 2014 film starring Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons. Great actors, great performances from them, and directed by Damien Chazelle, I believe. So if you haven't seen the film yet, I implore you to stop what you're doing, pause the podcast, and go watch the movie, because it will change your life, guaranteed. You can check out the links in the description to see where you could rent or buy this film, or you can go to your local library, get that shit for free. That's what I like to do, because Whiplash is most definitely a movie you need to see before you die. And Dan and I are going to start breaking it down and ruining it for you, so make sure you watch the movie. So, Dan, let's start with your general takeaway. We just watched the movie yesterday. What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
That it's whenever I first watched it, because this was absolutely not the first time that I watched it.
Right.
The first time that I saw this movie, it was one of the ones that you left the theater with like your jaw open.
I was with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were just like, what did we just watch? Like this, it was an amalgamation of so many different things, from just emotions as far as like just getting hyped up for just what the characters are going through, as well as just it was just a beautiful movie in general.
Oh, yeah.
We're both, film buffs. So like we look at the editing, we look at the cinematography, and we're just completely blown away by that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But there's also just like an emotional roller coaster when you watch the whole movie. My thoughts are pretty much the end scene of the movie. That's where it leaves you. Like,
it's crazy how everything builds up into that point, and just when you think you've hit the climax of the film and you're coming down, you're taken on a whole nother level of the roller coaster.
The J.K. Simmons character is like bringing it up, like speaks.
Yep,
that's the whole movie.
Yeah, really. So let's get into some specifics here and start talking about our protagonist, Andrew. I think he's a really interesting character to follow, and sort of as college students ourselves, when we saw the film, there was sort of a parallel to be drawn there that we could observe. No one really seems to understand Andrew or the sort of ambitions he has. His father seems to understand him in some level, I think, but in the fact that his father himself is a failed artist, a failed writer, I think Andrew sort of holds that against him. And there's the scene where he's eating dinner with his family, his sort of extended family, and they start talking about the things that his cousins have done, and it becomes very clear that they're sort of accepting of this level of mediocrity that by this point in the film, as viewers, we've come to see as something that's bad. Obviously, there's a pursuit of perfection that Andrew has, and his family sort of has these sort of traditional established views regarding success that Andrew completely disagrees with. And they also write off Andrew's musical abilities as something that's just sort of unimportant or frivolous, or, oh, that's nice that you still do that drumming thing. And then they start talking about, football. And they sort of praise, the cousins for their sort of conventional efforts. So what do you think that would sort of be like living in that kind of environment where, you're constantly misunderstood and unappreciated?
That would be terrible, because I know that growing up, in my family, it was always like your mother and father, and obviously in my case just my sisters, because I'm the only boy. They're always rooting for you. So like they're always like you can do it, and if you start to doubt yourself, they know that you can like accomplish something. Right. But they also have never put me in the position of like, all right, you're where you're at, you're doing good. It's always like they know that I can do better, that I can push myself. So like I don't think I could live in that environment, because I know myself. I sometimes thrive off of people like telling me like, hey, you're doing a good job. Like, hey, which we'll probably get to in a minute. Yep. And I like hearing that. But that's not something that's just like, okay, like I'm set, like I've plateaued. Like that's just like, okay, so I can do something else to get that like type of like, right. I don't know what it's called. What is it called? Like when somebody tells you like, good job.
Like positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement. Yeah. So I like that stuff.
Absolutely. I think we all do in some regard.
I don't think I could live with somebody who just like says like, oh, you're doing motion graphics.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Oh, okay, Jimmy, like, what are you working? Like, I would want
Yeah.
you want to talk more about it, and like you can see it in that scene. He just wants to talk more about it, like because they'll say like, so like you're in the studio drumming, and he's just like, well, it's not really, it's just that's the type of drumming or that's the type of band I'm in.
Yeah.
And they just like completely disregard it and move on.
Yeah,
Like, they don't
and
ask about.
He follows
more.
up with, it's Schaefer's pretty much the best school in the country, and I'm in the best class of it. So
Yeah.
that's like a big deal. And they're like, oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, how's Slippery Rock College over here? Like, how's like the Division III college football going?
Yeah.
Because in people's minds, that's bigger.
Right.
And like, I can kind of sympathize with him because going to like a music school is kind of similar to going to like a film school.
Absolutely.
It's a very small collective of like artists, and there's only like so many concentrated schools that do that type of thing. So like, I can sympathize with him whenever they say, oh, you're doing that music thing, right? When people like I guarantee you've experienced this with relatives. Oh, you're going to school for film, right? And you're like, yeah. And like, you try to talk about it and it's just way over their heads.
Yeah, they're like, oh, that's cute.
Uh-huh.
And then, yes, I would get that exactly. And my younger brother, who played baseball, it was like, oh, that's nice, Mark. You do stuff with cameras? Yeah, cool. Mike, how's baseball going? Mm-hmm. And they would just be, and he's the most unsociable person ever, and he'd rather them just be talking to me anyway, but it didn't matter. Mm-hmm. So that was always really annoying.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a huge pet peeve of mine when I'd just be interacting with my family members. So I can only imagine what Andrew must have been going through, because he was in a league completely of his own.
Yeah. And like, even how isolated his character is, because the only family that he has is his dad.
Yeah, so he already doesn't have a mom, which fucking sucks.
Yeah. And there's no friends that he has at that school. They don't establish any friends. So he's like alone. The only person he has at that time, is it the girl that he meets at the, or does he not meet her yet? I can't remember.
I mean, meeting her, I think, is part of his arc. Yeah. So he definitely longs to be in contact with someone. Yeah. I think drumming definitely takes precedence, and we see that over the course of the film. But, you know, he's just sort of like every other freshman, this sort of shy and awkward person. But he definitely makes an effort to be with Nicole, or to sort of have someone that can come to sort of understand him, because besides Nicole, he only really has his father. And he does, and it's not like she even understands him. No, and like, that's the ultimate demise of their relationship. And something could have come of it if he weren't as persistent with his drumming. You know, we'll never know. Like, they just didn't see eye to eye on things, like even education. Yes. Like, it was immediate that like he knows exactly what he's doing, and she did not know. Yeah. And like, she took offense to the fact that he was like probing her with questions about like, well, what do you want to do? Like that type of stuff. And I can sympathize with that. Like, sure. Like, coming from his point of view on that. Cause, and he also just sort of lacks like social skills. He's not good at sort of reciprocating the sort of flirtatious feelings that Nicole's giving him on the date. And even in just, you know, the way he interacts with other people, he's much more comfortable with himself, I think, and just with his drum set. So, I mean, do we think, is there anybody that Andrew is able to potentially connect with, or is him being alone just sort of a sacrifice he has to make or accept? Fletcher. He has Fletcher. I think he can connect with Fletcher. And I think that's why they're like the perfect, like, back and forth, the perfect, like, butting heads, like, they're perfect, I think. So even though there's this sort of constant butting heads, you're saying the relationship they have is still a meaningful one. Yeah, and I think it's because it's the way that they were set up. It was set up with Fletcher, who wants to find greatness, who wants to push greatness out of somebody, and Neiman, who wants Andrew Neiman, wants to be the great one. So that's why I think they work. So yeah, Andrew definitely wants to be one of the greats. That much I think we can agree on. It's established pretty well in the film. It's also obvious he doesn't care what other people think of him, but beyond that, I think that he almost thinks he's better than other people, or that he's beyond even having to maintain relationships with people, because he understands the ideal of perfection, and he understands that not settling for mediocrity puts him somehow in some other realm and makes him better than other people. We see that in the dinner scene as well, as well as the other things. But it also causes him, I think, to become much more aggressive and assertive just in his music classes over the course of the film. He's very timid when he first meets Fletcher, and even in his first regular ensemble class, not even the studio class yet. And by the middle of the film, he's dropping F-bombs and calling names almost as bad as Fletcher is.
He's yelling at Fletcher.
Yeah.
Like after one of their placement concerts, or I forget what it exactly was for, but like he like storms in there and he like yells at Fletcher and says like, "No, I earned this."
Yeah.
And Fletcher just goes on. It's just that's where they're like butting heads like completely.
Yeah. And I think another really cool thing about Andrew's character is the way he's paralleled to Charlie Parker over the course of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Charlie's set up as a great. We see him as this sort of aspirational character for Andrew to become.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they both had a mentor. Charlie had this Jones character, obviously, and then Andrew has Fletcher. Both of them are very dedicated to their craft. We definitely see that with Andrew throughout the film. We have the chair that's thrown by Fletcher at Andrew, and then we also have the symbol that gets thrown.
Mm-hmm. Some symbolization.
Some symbol, yes. Yeah. But what's most interesting to me is the fact that they both go through this humiliation, this like rite of passage in order to become a great. And we hear when Fletcher tells Andrew about Charlie being laughed off the stage, he gets humiliated in front of a bunch of people, but he comes right back at it the next day and keeps at it. And, you know, because of that, he was able to become a great, and like a year later or something, he eventually performs his best saxophone performance ever. And I think the parallel between that and Andrew eventually having the same thing happen to him, where he's sort of laughed off the stage when Fletcher tries to enact revenge, and instead of storming off and accepting his defeat and giving up drumming for good, he turns back and he comes to give his greatest performance, his greatest drum solo ever. Arguably maybe one of the best drum performances ever based on how well Fletcher received it. So is the fact that they're paralleled, I think, is unarguable, but is Andrew potentially the next Charlie Parker? Is he one of the greats? Does he have that potential?
I don't think so. No.
Why is that?
I think that I think the movie fulfilled it's showing like that Andrew can overcome Fletcher, and I think that was the sole reason of the movie, was that he was able to overcome Fletcher, and I think it just propels his career. I don't think that I can confidently say like he became a great.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. I just have mixed feelings regarding that. So, okay, Andrew definitely wants to please Fletcher.
Yeah.
We see that over the course of the film, very much so. And he holds Fletcher's opinion in a very high regard. He has a lot of respect for Fletcher. But, I mean, as an authority figure, I can see why he would have that coming into the school. Obviously, Fletcher's probably world-renowned in his abilities to produce great musicians. But, you know, even after his first class with Fletcher, where he goes through hell with him, why do you think Andrew maintains the position that Fletcher's opinion is important to him, especially after, you know, everything Fletcher puts him through? Why is Fletcher's opinion still so important to Andrew?
Probably because he produces great musicians, and I just think that everything that Andrew does, he does because he wants to be a great drummer.
Sure.
And I think that part of it is proving this person wrong by being really good.
Okay, yeah. And I mean, I think he's simultaneously proving Fletcher wrong and right. Because I mean, a lot of Fletcher exists sort of under the surface, and we don't ever really know what he's thinking or feeling. He's almost playing a character himself throughout the film. But yeah, I think Andrew knows that Fletcher won't settle for anything less than greatness, and by seeking Fletcher's approval, he's simultaneously seeking greatness. And I guess it's the pairing of those two concepts that causes Andrew to latch onto Fletcher so much.
Yeah, he knows that if he can please Fletcher, that means that he's doing everything that he can to be a great percussionist, to be a great drummer.
Yeah. Well, even beyond Andrew needing Fletcher's approval, making that a little more broad, what about the way even just people, not even Andrew, but people seek validation from mentors, from idols, even just from other peers? Like the way in which we just sort of crave to be validated. Where do you think that comes from?
Dopamine. getting the good feeling.
Just addicted to the rush in the brain.
Yeah, I think that everyone seeks approval and seeks validation, seeks just acknowledgement, positive reinforcement. I think that it's all seeked because it's just a good feeling. It's nice to feel like you're doing a good job. It's nice to feel that way. And it's probably addictive.
Yeah.
because it's just something that we were taught at a very young age. Like whenever you first learn to walk, like your parents are like, "Yay, he's doing it!" Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
So like, and that I think it just goes on. Like getting a good grade as a second grader on a spelling test, they give you a sticker that says like "Great
Sure.
job," and then that stuff just snowballs. And I think like to this day, like where we're at, we like hearing, "Oh, that was a really good like." Hey, that's a nice drawing, or like,
Yeah.
you did really well, like in that sport. Like it's a good thing to hear.
Right.
So I think it's a thing that we were taught as a infant, and we just
sure. Yeah,
continue.
I think we're definitely hardwired for it. What's most interesting to me is where the line eventually becomes drawn between seeking and needing validation, I guess, as just like something you need as a human, like food or water or shelter, and taking it so far as needing to be validated in the way that Andrew needs to be validated. You know, how many people eventually take up playing the drums? You know, lots of people. What's going to cause persons A, B, and C to give up and Andrew to keep going? For, you know, what causes the initial people to feel validated and for that need to be filled, and for Andrew to still feel empty? That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a personal
character
thing.
dynamic.
It's a very personal thing because Fletcher, whenever Neiman testifies about Fletcher, and we get to that scene where they're in that bar, they sit down and they start talking about everybody, and Fletcher says that Connolly dropped down or something into like another class, and then the other guy just went to pre-med.
Yeah.
So like those two guys obviously don't have what it takes to be the greatest drummer, and don't have that drive, whereas Neiman comes back and plays in the band. So like, I don't know. I think it's a personal thing. It's a very personal thing. And if the turmoil is not worth it, then that's not what you really want, I guess. And I think that would be argued about like a lot of like professional athletes, obviously the musicians, artists. I just think like to get to the point to be the greatest or to be known by so many people, I think you need to be able to take all the shit and take all the hardships that come with that. Because then if you give up, it's just not, obviously it's not something you're completely passionate about. Yeah,
you definitely need to have that strength of character. But I mean, I think coupled with that, you also have to be so insecure in a sense that your pursuit of that greatness is the only thing you have, and that's what's keeping you going. And I think the fact that Andrew had nothing else is what allowed him to eventually be able to become, or have the potential to be great. Because we never actually get to, we don't get to see his whole life play out, which is actually kind of sad that you have to sort of, cut yourself off from people and relationships and hobbies and interests, and, to only have drumming, or to have one thing, even if you're the best at it. That just seems unfulfilling to me, but I guess that's why I'm not the best at anything.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah. But it was said really well by Neiman. Like, he's like, I would rather die at 35 drunk and be the greatest than only have friends until I'm 90. Yeah. So, like, that just says a lot about his character right there.
It does. And I don't know if we can ostensibly say which one is better or worse, because I guess ultimately it is a matter of personal preference. Yeah. But it's interesting what sorts of influences would cause a person to come to that realization.
But I think we saw what Neiman actually wanted. So like by like his dad left the apartment like towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And he calls Nicole. Yeah. And I think at that point he realized like, I don't want to be the greatest drummer. But
maybe not even a drummer.
Correct. Because he at that point he came to the like, he was eye to eye with Fletcher, and he thought like, we're good. Like you're not trying to push people anymore. I'm not a drummer anymore. And then he's like, do you want to come play? And he just thought like, okay, that'd be nice. Like after not playing drums for a while, that might be fun. And like, we seem to be like buddies. Yeah. And then, so he calls Nicole and he's like, I want to have a good life. Like I want to be with somebody. I want to share things with somebody, but I also am just going to kind of play drums. And then Nicole doesn't show up. He gets there. Fletcher turns out to be reverts back to being the teacher again. And then they have to like go at it. So like, I think he realized what he wanted, but then he just had to overcome this thing that he hasn't overcome yet. Yeah. So I think we saw what he actually wanted, like when he calls Nicole, but she doesn't show up. So I think he just goes off to be the greatest drummer. Like that's what he wants to become. Yeah. So I think we see where it's all going, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Because, like, I forget who said it, but you get in the scene late, you get out early. And I think that's exactly what happened in that
Definitely.
scene. So I think that we're left to believe that he goes on to just pursue drumming for the rest of his life.
Oh,
solely.
definitely. Yeah.
And I think it's because Nicole didn't show up. And I think that's what we were trying to be told in the movie.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of it at the end. Was like he's set off to want to be the best drummer and
Sure.
he's to pursue all those things, but it's because of Nicole not showing up.
So even if he did go on to eventually become a great, I guess it could be argued that it almost happened by accident, you know, and the fact that if any other sort of external stimuli would have worked their way into his life during the summer where he wasn't drumming, anything could have distracted him from potentially going on to give that performance or be great in the future. That's a scary thought.
Terrifying.
Let's talk more about the relationship between Andrew and Fletcher. What about the realization we might have to come to regarding when we finally meet our idols, right? We have these people that are built up in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
We know they're great because they know they're great. They've proven their greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And we meet them and they come into our lives and they aren't who we thought they were. They're not just different people, but in Fletcher's case, an awful person.
Mm-hmm.
Just a downright awful person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you come to terms with that? Especially as Andrew, who needs someone like Fletcher. You know, he feels that he can't become great without Fletcher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you sort of cope with that? I guess it goes back to just the sort of pure tenacity that comes with a person's character.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely had the experience before of having an idea of someone in my head and meeting them in real life and getting to know them and them not meeting that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regard, part of me feels bad for myself because I was naive or silly enough to think that this person would be a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
either because I wanted them to be or because I expected them to be, based on who I thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
But part of me also feels bad for them in that they could exist as this good, ideal person in my mind, and in reality, that wasn't able to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, this isn't something that happens to me often, I guess, fortunately, but it's an odd thing to have to go through to have someone built up in your mind as a good person, arguably, and to meet them and to have them not meet that expectation. It's a very defeating feeling because we look up to our idols, you know, we try to base who we are on them and we try to match and carry characteristics from them, and to come to the realization that they aren't who you thought they were, they aren't as good as you thought they were. You know, it causes you to sort of question your own identity, I think, and sort of wonder if your actions or your feelings are right or correct. But needless to say, I think Andrew and Fletcher definitely develop an odd relationship over the course of the film. One minute it seems like Fletcher likes Andrew, and the next minute he hates him, and we go back and forth on that very often. And you never quite come to understand Fletcher's true intentions or feelings. I feel like you're sort of always in the dark about that.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Are they friends?
No.
Is there respect among them? Like what can we make of the way they interact?
I just think that they work off of each other, and I think that
So it's a purely collaborative relationship, we'll call it.
sure, it's a loose way. It's a using that term loosely. Yes, I think they just know that like nobody's gonna push Neiman harder than Fletcher, and Fletcher knows that he is the greatest like drummer that he's ever dealt with. So like,
they're just
gonna
sort of
work
using
off,
each
They're
other.
gonna work off of each other. Yeah.
So it is a symbiotic relationship, but they're both like parasites.
Yeah. Like they couldn't go out and get a beer together.
They do have that drink, the one time though, but I guess that was
That was coincidental.
facade.
And that was when that was
it
at
was
a point.
also a coincidence.
Yeah, that was at a point when they thought that they were like cool. You know,
Yeah.
they thought that they were all right.
What's odd though is that even after it all comes to an end, Andrew's been kicked out of school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his relationship with Fletcher is arguably over.
Mm-hmm.
He still has trouble turning Fletcher in. As a viewer, you know, I'm just thinking like, what the fuck are you doing? Like this guy was a complete and total dick to you. Like look at the shit he put you through, and you're struggling with the decision to turn him in. Like
Yeah. You're in a car accident.
right, like
Yeah.
the stakes could not be more high. I mean, I guess you could have died,
Mhm.
but then the decision wouldn't be there for you to make.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in that regard, Andrew still realizes that everything he was put through was almost necessary, and he can respect Fletcher's want to pursue, or Fletcher's need to pursue greatness in his students. Is there any sort of happy middle ground, or is Fletcher's
Not for Fletcher, I don't think.
are his methods working? Is what he's doing right?
You're supposed to not like Fletcher after you learn that the kid hung himself, but I think that just means that the kid wasn't a great. He wasn't a great.
Sure.
And Fletcher just wants to find a great. And
Yeah.
I don't think that the things that he does would cause somebody to want to kill themselves. I don't think that you can like connect what he was doing to that because he was out of the school for like 2 years or something like that. So I don't know. I think that his methods are like there's always a coach to a great. There's always, so I think that it's fair that he's like, I'm gonna do it regardless. I don't feel sorry for it, and I think that that's true. Obviously, the school board has something different to say about that, but
yeah, and that's fine.
yeah, that's how I feel about it. So I don't think there is an ideal.
Or maybe that is the ideal. You know,
Could be the ideal.
because I guess it depends on the result you're looking for. And if achieving a great is the end result, then perhaps that is what's necessary. Fletcher definitely wants to find the next Charlie Parker. He definitely wants to find the next great. And it's really interesting watching the way he breaks Andrew down over the course of the film. As a viewer, you can't quite connect the causes to the character's wants because nothing comes to fruition, I think, until that final scene. But it's just interesting to see how they sort of all stack up. We have, for his first class, Andrew's first class, Fletcher tells him to show up at 6 a.m. sharp, but the class doesn't start until 9. Like, just a dick move on his part. And after the first class, Fletcher gives Andrew, like, a little pep talk, you know, tries to, like, connect with him and, you know, be his friend.
He tells him the whole Charlie Parker thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they come right back in after that, and there's the whole rushing, dragging, not quite, slapping scene, just putting him through hell. I'm upset, you know, all that shit. And then later, he eventually brings in Connolly just to piss off Andrew, just to rile him and cause him to work, you know, that much harder and put in that much more effort. And I love when he tells him, if you want the part, earn it. Nothing is yours. And that's one thing that I think Andrew struggled with over the course of the film is he was able to accept that he needed to practice and you know, work to achieve greatness. But he'd reach these plateaus where he'd think, okay, I made it this far. And Fletcher would have to continually tell him, no, you know, this isn't greatness yet. There's more for you to do. But at some points, it just seems like Fletcher has it out for Andrew. Is there anything vindictive there, or is he purely a teacher pursuing the creation of greatness?
That's what I see it as.
So you think he has to be this dick in order to bring that out of Andrew?
Yes, I do. That's exactly how I see it.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just how his character just comes off that way the entire movie.
Yeah.
Like the first time we meet him, like literally the first interaction they have with him is Fletcher meets him in that, I don't even know what that room was. It was just some weird offshoot with the drum set in it.
Yeah.
And like he just gives him a bunch of shit. Like he's just like, so why'd you stop playing? And then he starts playing again. He's like, you're like a wind up monkey. Like I ask you a question, you just said, he just has it out for him immediately.
Yeah.
And I think that's because like he just saw a drummer and he's just like, is this guy good enough? And he hears something, so he brings him up to his class, and then he sees that he's good enough, so he's like, I'm going to just keep pushing this kid. And that's what I think it was.
My concern would just be more of how much of an asshole do you have to be to elicit that greatness from someone? Because like in the first scene especially, he just met Andrew. He didn't know that much about him. Sure, I guess he was trying to gauge his drumming skills, but the whole, why'd you stop playing? Why'd you start playing? Like, you just fucking met the kid, you know? I don't know. At some points, there's definitely instances where you could see that Fletcher had methodically thought out ways in which he could bring greatness out of Andrew.
Yeah.
But other times, he's just being an asshole, I feel like.
Some of them, yeah.
Especially with his name calling.
His name calling's funny.
I was losing it throughout the film. I mean, it's awful what he's doing and saying to these kids, but just he had some creative names to call them.
He did. And a lot of it came out with the out-of-tune trombone player. And he was like, it's either you're out of tune or you don't know you're out of tune, and you not knowing you're out of tune is worse than you just, you know.
That was a weird thing to think about.
Yeah.
And the fact that he almost took it personally, you know, that how dare you try to sabotage my band.
Yeah. I strongly believe he's a teacher first, and that's all that he is.
Teacher first. Okay.
Yes.
The film, to me, in this regard, is very similar to Full Metal Jacket. In the beginning of the film, we have these Army recruits for the Vietnam War going through hell from their drill sergeant. And we see the way in which people are broken down when they go to the military to be built back up, to be the types of soldiers that they want and need. And I think Andrew goes through that same sort of psychological hell. And there's lots of parallels between Andrew and the initial protagonist of Full Metal Jacket.
I think it's a good comparison for Fletcher and a drill sergeant, though.
Absolutely.
Like, that's exactly what he is, I think. So
yeah,
that even makes me believe more like he's a teacher that is just pushing.
I guess that does
students.
reinforce that notion.
That's how I see it then, for sure.
Then on the other side, then, if we look at Andrew as this sort of cadet, this sort of recruit, is he able to be broken down? Are there limits that Andrew has?
No, he got in a car accident and ran to make sure that he could play.
So that's the ultimate test. That's the culmination of him being unbreakable.
I think that's that, and the very final scene where Fletcher doesn't tell him like what the set list is.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and just plays his own set list.
Yeah.
Like that. I think that was a great moment.
Absolutely.
And I think those were the moments that shows like he's not going to be brought down by anything.
What really hits home for me in the whole film is the scene where where Andrew meets Fletcher in the bar, and they're sort of getting drinks. And at one point Fletcher says, "I don't think people understood what I was doing at Schaefer. I was there to push people beyond what was expected." And then he finishes up by saying, there are no two words more harmful in the English language than good job. What do you make of that?
That was the first time I've ever heard that, and like that was a life-changing way to view the word good job. The words good job.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, when I hear that now, or whenever I think about somebody giving me positive reinforcement, I'm just like, okay, that's nice, but I can still do better.
Yeah.
And like, obviously, I don't want somebody like throwing a chair at my head or like
Oh,
yelling at me and stuff. No, I don't want that. But I think that moment in the movie was where I was just like, okay, just because you did something well, it doesn't mean you can't do better. Doesn't mean that you did a terrible job. Doesn't mean that it was an ass of a like project or something like that. But I do think that he was very right in saying what he said, and that it made total sense, and it was obviously perfect for the movie, but
absolutely
applicable in anybody's life. So.
Absolutely. And it was a sort of concept or idea that I'd thought about before, but I was never to put in such a concise way, and to have it framed at me that way was revolutionary, I think. Because especially for us, because we're a bit younger, I feel like from the time you're a child, you're raised and coddled and put in this protective shell, and you're told that everything's going to be okay. You're great, you're good, and you're given all this positive reinforcement because you need it. But there's something to be had in the sort of deprivation of that, to sort of hold back on that, and to give people the causes they need to become better than what they are.
Yeah.
And I've always been a perfectionist. I've always hated people telling me that something was good or something was great when I could go back and tell them, well, it's not this, it's not that. I can see obvious flaws in it. Or on the other hand, to be giving people feedback and to be tearing something down or tearing something apart that is ostensibly good, and for them to not be able to take it, for them to not be able to understand that I was coming from a place of pursuit of perfection opposed to simple, stoking of feelings.
Yeah. Like, we went to school together, and we've sat through many feedback processes. And if something was ass, nobody ever said that sucked.
No.
And if something was decent, you got nitpicked. And you were never told, like, no, that was good. But here's, like, a detrimental thing that you're not looking at. Like, nothing was perfect, but just as much as something was perfect, nothing ever sucked.
Yeah.
And that was so annoying.
Yeah, everything existed in this middle ground of mediocrity, and I feel like a lot of us never amounted to anything because of it. It's really upsetting.
I think it's something that people need to realize individually, that you need to be pushed for things. I don't think to the point that the movie, the Whiplash shows.
Extreme.
It's an extreme, but I also think that there's like the complete opposite extreme. So like if you show somebody something and they say good job, that doesn't mean like it was really good and you don't have to work on it anymore. But that doesn't mean that it was like ass, like it wasn't terrible.
And I think there's a middle ground there that we can come to appreciate. If we can come to associate good job with meaning, okay, you got a solid C+ on this, 80%.
You're not doing bad,
Right, you're on the right track,
But you need to push yourself.
Right, go back, work on it, finesse it, make it as close to perfect as you can. And there's also a great fear with people in the pursuit of perfection, and like giving something your all and trying as hard as you can, because if you stop short, if you stop at you're good enough at your 80%, you can at least rest easy in the fact and saying, oh well, I could have tried harder, I could have done 100, I just didn't want to, I didn't want to put in the effort. But I think there's this fear that if we give it 100, if we give it everything we got, we'll come to the realization that we're not as great or as good as we thought,
and you work harder.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the sort of thing Andrew lives with and accepts all the time.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people will stop short just so they can save their own egos and feel good about themselves, which is sad. But after Fletcher says the no two words more harmful than good job, Andrew even asks, is there a line? Are you able to sort of go too far, or can you discourage Charlie Parker from becoming Charlie Parker? And then Fletcher comes back and says no, because Charlie Parker wouldn't be discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Is Fletcher right there?
Mm-hmm. I do think he's right there.
So if you're the great, if you're meant to be the great, you are a great, you will be the great. No amount of deterral or positive or negative reinforcement or chair or symbol throwing will deter you from becoming that.
Correct.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah. And there's only so many people out there that do that.
Right, a handful.
But there's never going to just be one great person. There's always going to be more people that can amount to the same level.
And there's lots of things to be great at.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of finding that regarding yourself, or accepting that you're just mediocre,
Mm-hmm.
which is another hard thing. But
Sure.
there's too many people.
There's a lot of people.
Okay, let's talk about the death of Sean Casey then, and the fact that Fletcher admits he never found his Charlie Parker.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's been longing for. After his time at Schaefer, whenever him and Andrew are still getting drinks, that's he's sort of stuck in this longing phase and wanting his Charlie Parker.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear of the death of Sean Casey, Fletcher's definitely upset that a student of his died. Like, we can visibly see it, and it's odd for us because it's a huge change in his demeanor. But we later learn that Casey hung himself,
Mm-hmm.
and that Fletcher lied to his students about that part,
Mm-hmm.
which brings up some interesting questions for us. So
Yeah.
why do you think Fletcher gets upset over this? Because nothing else seems to rattle him, really, at any point in the film. I mean, beyond him getting pissed off.
I don't know. Maybe he thought that was like one of his moments, like that he was able to create somebody great.
So he's not even upset that a student of his died, or that he might have caused him to kill himself. He's upset because a potential great was lost.
Yeah, because maybe he invested a lot of time and that ended up not paying off. So like I think probably a little bit. He's a human. Like they still set him up as a human, and that it hurt him. But I think that in the end, like, he was upset that somebody that he did push that hard couldn't take it.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you. It's also a mild contradiction, though, in the same sense, because upon hearing of the death, you'd think he'd be able to accept, okay, well, he didn't have what it took.
No, I think that's where the human part comes in, is where, like, he's originally hit with, like, wow, like, somebody that I spent 4 years with died. So and, like, that's a shame. So
death is where he draws the line.
Probably.
So whatever, he's literally thinking that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes.
So that's sort of Fletcher's bumper sticker.
Yeah, because like the car crash didn't kill Neiman, and he still like ran to the
very
concert.
good point.
So like I think that's why he's like, okay, this kid is in it. He's in it for the long haul. I'm not going to give up on this kid.
Yeah, that's also very odd because the car accident is what eventually causes Andrew to not be able to perform.
Yeah,
to leave the school and
he attacked Fletcher. Like I think that's where Fletcher's like, well, shit, like this kid is like for real.
Do we think if he hadn't had attacked Fletcher that he would have been able to still do well at Schaefer?
No, I think that was
I think he would have been blacklisted regardless.
Yeah, I think that was pretty.
But yeah, needless to say, I think Fletcher will definitely do whatever it takes to find his Charlie Parker, regardless of the damage, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's set up very clear with everything that's happening in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've skirted around it for a while now. Let's talk about the ideals of perfection, the pursuit of perfection, the pursuit of greatness. So, I mean, Andrew is a character. He literally bleeds for the craft. He sacrifices relationships. He's either constantly drumming or thinking about drumming. He can't sort of get it off his mind. It's his life. And we know that Andrew wants to be a great. He sacrifices everything pretty much for his possibility to achieve greatness. And I think the pursuit of perfection also causes people to become very selfish. We see Andrew become much more selfish over the course of the film. Between the three drummers in the studio band, there's this sort of unspoken hatred that develops between them because they're all, in competition with one another. Andrew breaks up with Nicole ultimately because of the pursuit of perfection, because he knows that he could never give her the attention she needs, and maybe he's right in that. But is all of this necessary, do you think? Is all this pain and unhappiness even worth the perfection or greatness?
I don't think it is at all.
No?
No. If I've learned anything over the last year of like working in the industry that we've worked in, is you need to be at 100%. You need to be at 100% personally and with your health in order to be able to do what you want to do. If like say like you were married and you ended up going through like a divorce and like you're breaking up, like you have to deal with like kids and stuff like that, like what you're doing with that, like do you think that would affect your work?
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at it from like you just have to flip that.
Yeah.
do you think that your work, like making sure that your work is where you want it to be, do you think that could affect your kids and your family?
Definitely.
It's just hand in hand. So like I think if your work goes to shit, your family could go to shit, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to just make sure that like you're balancing that stuff. So I think it's a balance, not all for one. And
it's definitely a balance, but in that same point you're raising, he's already accepted that putting everything into his drumming, his work is a given. And that's what causes him to realize he can't be with Nicole. He can't really have friends, not that he really wants them.
Sure.
And that drumming is all he has.
Sure.
But in the fact that he's not maintaining a balance, he's probably not healthy. He's probably not eating right or sleeping right, or he's young, so I'm sure he's fine now, but if he were to keep at it, I'm sure he would burn out very quickly. Yeah. Which is sad.
But like you saw, like at first he was balancing it, and he realized he couldn't be great if he was with Nicole.
Yes.
So he broke off with Nicole and started drumming 100%, and that fell apart. And then he realized, well, maybe I want Nicole, or like the idea of Nicole.
Sure.
So he tries to get Nicole, and that it doesn't happen. So then he goes back to drumming, and I think that's when he like realizes, like, I need both. He's gonna have to have both because like they complement each other in a way that he didn't realize.
I think his inability to get Nicole caused him to rely solely on the drumming, and I think especially now that Fletcher's sort of proof of concept came through in the fact that he was able to create Andrew with the performance he gave in the end. I see the future for Andrew as I guess good in his regard, in that I think he's going to achieve some level of greatness, but from an outsider perspective, a normal person, will call me, a person who appreciates like a life balance, I don't think he'll ever be able to achieve that or even want it. I think he's transcended that. I think he's beyond that. But and you were also alluding to this as well. I think happiness has to fit in there somewhere.
But he might get happiness from drumming.
He might.
So.
It's just it's a weird dichotomy because we spend so much time seeing Andrew in pain. He's bleeding, like his muscles hurt. He's strained as he's drumming. It doesn't look like it's something he enjoys. He gets in a fucking car accident and he goes on stage and goes through with it anyway. So what? I don't understand what can cause someone to want something that badly, to have that much drive. I just can't understand.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what creates the separation.
Sure.
That's why he's him and I'm not.
And also, drumming is a perfect way to show that because it takes both physical talent as well as mental talent to be able to do it, because it's not the same as like piano. You know, like piano, you're not going to be doing it as fast or as hard as like drumming. So like it was the perfect way to represent
absolutely
the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of perfection.
Yeah.
And like that was because like you even saw like whenever like you're doing that double time swing, like you just lose control of your facial. You can't like control your face while you're concentrating on making your hands do that thing.
He looked like he was finishing up like some crazy set of reps or something.
Yeah.
At the and he's fucking like sweating and bleeding.
Yeah, and he's like it's all like it's worth it to him to push through it because he's proving it to himself that he can do it. So I think that it was like the perfect way to show that
tenacity.
It was the perfect way to show that
drive.
I think.
Absolutely. And I love that with that, the film also sort of does away with the idea that the music is some sort of like sissy, artsy fartsy sort of craft. And we're also like sort of led to believe that these like musical prodigies are just sort of born with greatness. And
to work for it, yeah.
I know in some regard, you're definitely born with musical abilities and talents. And like, like these fucking 3-year-olds that can play Yo-Yo Ma, that's insane. Like that's they're definitely born with something. But there's definitely... The film definitely shows the sort of great lengths that people have to go through to actually achieve something.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how psychologically intense you can make a film about a person aspiring to achieve musical greatness in the same regards as you'd see on the battlefield or like in a sporting event. Like this was way more intense than like horror or thriller films that are designed specifically to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yes.
It's about drumming.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about it yet. The title of the film.
Whiplash. Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? Why do you think they decided to call it Whiplash?
Well, Whiplash, first of all, you can get that from being in a car accident. So it's interesting that they put a car accident into the movie.
Yeah.
But Whiplash is takes you by surprise. Something that you don't expect to happen, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of different meanings behind it, I think. And I think it was a perfect name for the movie because I think that it was just what Whiplash is. It was a perfect way to describe it. Like I said, it takes you by surprise.
Like a metaphor for their relationship almost. between Andrew and Fletcher.
Because like out of nowhere, he goes from, like you said earlier, going from
Yeah.
being this caring and accepting of Andrew, and then just throwing chairs at him and calling him a pig fucker and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
and Andrew going from having complete and utter respect for this
Mhm.
man
To hating him.
to hating him
Yeah, it's just an emotional.
simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the sort of song itself, the song Whiplash, the way that the song is even able to give Andrew the opportunity to eventually become first chair, it almost even sets the stage for his relationship with Fletcher, which is interesting. It sort of makes you wonder or think what if things would have played differently if, the song weren't involved.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing. We've skirted around a bit of it in our talk thus far, but we end with Fletcher inviting Andrew to play at the JVC, but he doesn't give him the sheet music. He assumes he's playing
It's
music
just
he's
gonna-
already aware
yeah,
of.
Yeah.
And then he tells him, I know it was you. And then, he can't keep up. It's not a song he can play along with. So, devastated, he goes to leave, embraced by his father. But then he decides to go back out and perform.
Yeah. He realizes it's a cymbal moment. It was the throwing cymbal at that moment.
So you think this is Andrew realizing Fletcher's not done. He's not done playing games. This is my chance
It's
to
a
prove
test
myself.
still. Yeah. Yeah. I still think it's a test.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a win-win scenario that Fletcher set up for himself, and that he could finally break Andrew and enact revenge for being fired from Schaefer, or drive him to be great. And it's kind of ingenious. And I'm glad. I think that the latter ultimately paid off.
He also never played Caravan throughout the movie, I don't think.
No,
Because he couldn't finish it when they were on stage.
no, and he was fighting Connolly
Yeah.
earlier, or Fletcher set that up against Andrew anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he is able to redeem himself in that regard too, which is also great. And another interesting moment I thought was the fact that he runs off stage and he's not just running away from Fletcher, but his father's there and he's running to his father. And it's the moment after they come in the embrace that Andrew steps back and sort of realizes he has to go back out there. I think he almost realizes that, this was a moment his father probably went through as well at some point in his failed writing career.
And he kept walking.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and in staying with his father, or whoever his father had at that time, he was solidifying his life as a teacher, or as a
Whatever the equivalent
a
is.
non-artist, someone who's mediocre.
Yeah.
And, the fact that Andrew had to come to that, make that realization, reject it, and go back out, I thought that was really interesting.
And it was really quick.
Yes.
It was very fast.
Instantaneously.
It was like Whiplash.
It was like Whiplash. So Andrew comes back out on stage and plays the best solo drum song of his career up until this point, arguably ever, based on how well Fletcher receives it. Because we've seen how critical he is throughout the film, and he's almost excited now. Like this is a completely new Fletcher that we've never seen. What do you make of that?
It took a long time for Fletcher's arc to happen, and it was a great spot to have it happen right there.
Yeah.
He's
He's established as this unmovable brick.
Yeah.
We see him cry over Sean Casey's death. He gets a little real in the bar after he gets fired. But other than that,
stone. Yeah.
he's a stone. Yeah. The very end of the film is interesting to me whenever the song's over.
Yeah.
And that we see Andrew's face, looking for Fletcher. I think he's seeking that approval. He's to him, I think he's saying like, I did it. Now what? And we come in on Fletcher's eyes and we see them light up. And we come back to Andrew and we see his face light up. And then
They're good.
they're good.
Yeah.
And the film ends on, the end of the song, this big crescendo coming to an end, and we're left feeling happy almost. But I think the ending's a lot more sinister than that, in that the whole time Fletcher still got what he wanted. Andrew gave in to him. He took the bait from the cymbal being thrown in his head again. And if nothing else, Andrew just proved that Fletcher's awful behavior works. Because up until this point, even in the bar, Fletcher almost seemed as if the fact that him being an awful person and trying to pull this greatness from people was like a failed experiment. And he still believed in perfection, but it was almost as if he was giving up on trying to find someone. He tried his hardest. And I think the fact that Andrew was able to resist all of Fletcher's abuse throughout the film and come out of it and give that performance finally told Fletcher, it worked. It's right. And I don't know if that should have happened, if that was a good thing. What do you think?
I think it's a win for both of them. So I don't think it was just a win for Fletcher. I think
Okay.
that Neiman coming back proved that he could take everything that Fletcher, because what else could Fletcher do to him, really? Like, he did like almost everything he could. He insulted his, like, the fact that his mother ran away from him.
Yeah.
Indirectly got him in a car crash, threw a chair at him. Like, there was just so many, like, he emotionally and physically tormented Andrew. And I think that him coming back just, like, proves that, like, you can't bring him down at all. Like, you just tried to humiliate him in front of, like, all these people that could, like, never hire him. He, like, threatened him. He threatened the whole band with that. If you mess up, like, they'll remember. So I think that him coming back is a victory for him, and Fletcher got what he wanted because he's, like, he came back like nobody else has ever came back to him like that, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a win for both of them in non-cynical ways.
I guess. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I guess the problem for me is that the whole time, it all happens in those final 3 shots, I think, with the play between their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
In that we see that the whole time Andrew just wanted Fletcher's acceptance.
Yeah.
And Fletcher just wanted his Charlie Parker. And both of their wants existed outside of themselves. They were just sort of external wants. And in achieving them, I don't know, like, they both got what they wanted, which was good. That's the resolution we come to. We see that they're happy. But I don't know if that's what was best for them.
It was a wants and a needs thing. Like, Neiman wants to be the greatest, but in order to be the greatest, he needs Fletcher's approval. Fletcher wants a Charlie Parker, but he needs someone who's going to withstand everything that he puts them through. And I think they both got that.
I guess the argument I would make is, at the same time, Andrew also needs to be able to perfect his interpersonal skills, develop better relationships, find some hobbies, become a well-rounded person.
It might not happen.
And Fletcher needs to learn how to control his temper and find something else to anchor himself to being able to get through life other than this pursuit of a perfect musician. And I guess the problem for me is the fact that both of these characters are flawed, and things that they want, they have to rely on other people for. And it's good that they got them, that is resolved, but they're still these imperfected, flawed people. And it begs the question for me of what's the future of their relationship. The story was told, we end on a resolution, but where do you think they go from there? To me, I see them continuing to collaborate much more as peers now. We definitely see that there's an actual collaboration happening on stage at the end. You see the teacher-student relationship begin to fade away, which is an interesting dynamic. But I see Andrew aspiring to greatness. I see him becoming a great, going down in history as a famous drummer, one of the best drummers, maybe the best drummer, and then burning out, overdose in his 30s, hanging himself, whatever. But for me, that's not, I don't know. I think it's a sad ending. I think we're meant to take away something upsetting. I don't feel uplifted in knowing that Andrew's going to become a great, or that Fletcher finally got his Charlie Parker. So the whole time you're watching the film, the film begs the question, do the ends justify the means? Do Fletcher's methods justify the hell that Andrew and Fletcher's other students had to go through to be great? So not just Andrew, but all of the other people that obviously weren't cut out for it. The shit they had to go through and endure, was it worth all of that so that Andrew, the only great we saw come out of this, that he was able to become himself?
Yeah, I guess. Because, like, all those people weren't meant to be a great if he ends up being a great. Like the dude that he yells at for the trombone thing. Like, maybe he quits and he becomes a doctor and saves people's lives.
Or he kills himself.
Well,
because he develops PTSD.
I guess.
How many Sean Caseys come out of that?
I don't know. But you also can't say that it's just Fletcher that caused that kid to die.
It's true, and the film doesn't dwell on it that much, but when you have nothing, when you put all of yourself into something, and then you realize that something is not for you, and you have nothing, having no relationships with people, having no discernible talents or skills, that causes people to question whether or not they should be alive. I think that leads people to suicide. I don't know if the ends justify the means here.
Okay. I don't know if I agree. I think that it might. Because, like, he also, like, said, like, this guy quit being a drummer and went to pre-med. Might have saved a bunch of people's lives there.
You're getting deep here, Dan.
I'm just saying, like, it was very clear that, like, the amount of people that he pushed, some of them didn't make it as far as drummers, but they might have been driven into a different path. Yes, there might be some people that killed themselves, maybe because of Fletcher, but a lot of people definitely became other things that might have, like, bettered humans in general and other people.
So your philosophy is, in driving them to be great at music or whatever their instrument was, he was rounding them out as people
Mm-hmm.
and causing them to come to discover who they were anyway.
Yeah, so like somebody, like the one dude could have became a drummer and then played with like offshoot bands that went nowhere for the rest of his life, or he showed them like, you're not meant to be a drummer, and they're like, they realized that and they became something else entirely.
That they were great at.
I don't know if it was
Maybe a lot
That
of us are
wasn't-
destined for mediocrity.
maybe people are destined for mediocrity,
I think a lot of us are.
and maybe some people don't find what they're supposed to do. But if that's the case, he's working with needles in a needle in a haystack, so a needle in a huge haystack in a field of hay.
Or some of the hay dies.
All of the hay dies.
Oh, that's dark.
Well, all the hay is gonna die.
Eventually,
Yeah,
some of the hay kills itself.
some of the hay does, but
Yeah, I don't know. I guess in order for there to be greatness, because we living in a world of mediocrity would be unimaginable. I guess you have to accept the collateral damage that comes with it,
such is life.
such as life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's it for this episode of Movies to Watch Before You Die podcast. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
Yeah.
We had a pretty good talk, I think.
Thank you for having me. I
Absolutely.
enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed the film and are now able to think a little more profoundly about what greatness is and how to go about achieving it. Again, you can check out the links in the description to find out where you can buy this film, because it's definitely one you're going to want to see multiple times. Also, stay tuned for episode 5 of the podcast next Thursday, where we'll break down the film Moon and discuss some cool topics like isolationism, identity, and the ethics of cloning. If you've not yet seen Moon, I would highly recommend you watch it before next week so you'll know exactly what we'll be talking about. And if you have seen the film, kudos, good for you, but maybe watch again anyway. Jog your memory. As usual, links for the film are in the description. Take a peek and see where you can rent or buy it before next week. And finally, if you'd like to support Movies to Watch Before You Die, please consider signing up for a free trial of Amazon Prime via the affiliate link below. With Amazon Prime membership, you get unlimited free 2-day shipping, access to Kindle ebooks, and, most importantly, the ability to instantly watch thousands of movies and TV shows directly from Amazon's virtual library. You're probably thinking, that sounds great. Maybe I should check it out. Well, you can right now. Take a look in the description there, and you'll see a link for a 30-day free trial. That's 30 days of free access to all of those wonderful things I just talked about. If you liked what you heard this week, please consider leaving us a review or a comment on whatever platform you use to listen to the podcast. We love hearing from all of you, love hearing your feedback. And if you'd like to stay up to date on all things related to the podcast, please be sure to join our mailing list via our website. Okie dokie. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time.